A millionaire heir, stripped of his wallet and pride after a late-night robbery, stepped onto a crowded bus with nothing left but embarrassment until a tired waitress paid his fare with the last dollar she had. She didn't want thanks. She didn't even ask his name. But that tiny act of kindness hit him harder than the robbery itself, and it changed everything that came after. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. Bus ticket of fate, the moment a waitress unknowingly changed a millionaire's life. Logan Gates Kensington had never felt the night press against him the way it did in Brooklyn, cold, sharp, and strangely personal. His polished shoes scraped the pavement as he stumbled to his knees beside his luxury sedan, its door pried open and the glove compartment torn apart. The street lamps flickered weakly above him, throwing shadows over the place where a gang of robbers had just stripped him of everything he owned. His wallet, his watch, his phone, his car keys, even the quiet confidence he wore like armor. For the first time in his life, the heir of Kensington International stood completely helpless. He tried flagging down a taxi, but none stopped. Without a phone, he couldn't call his driver, his assistant, or security. He had always been one call away from safety, yet tonight every lifeline had been cut. After several minutes of wandering aimlessly, he finally realized he had no choice. He'd have to take the bus. The humiliation of that thought stung deeper than the cold air biting at his face. But he kept walking, head down, suit wrinkled, every step forcing him into a reality he never thought he'd face. A few blocks away, inside the dim glow of an old bus shelter, Camilla Hart rubbed her hands together as the neon lights hummed above her. She had just finished an 11-hour shift at the small diner where she worked, and exhaustion clung to her shoulders like a wet blanket. Still, she stood upright, steady, waiting for the bus home the way she did every night. Her uniform smelled faintly of coffee and burnt toast, and her fingers trembled slightly from fatigue, but there was a calmness to her, a quiet resilience built from years of making do with very little. The bus screeched to a stop. Camilla stepped forward, counting the few crumpled bills she saved from leftover tips. Enough for the ride, maybe for breakfast tomorrow. She handed the cash to the driver and made her way to the back, hoping to close her eyes for just a moment. Then the driver's irritated voice cut through the aisle. "Sir, I already told you. No money, no ride." Camilla opened her eyes. At the front of the bus stood the same man she had seen walking toward the stop moments earlier, his shirt dirty, his hair out of place, his expression shaken but strangely composed. He tried to explain, breath unsteady. I was robbed. They took everything. I just need to get home." The driver scoffed. "Right. I hear that story every night. Step aside." Two passengers murmured, casting suspicious glances. Logan swallowed hard. He had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, faced boardrooms full of sharks, stood on stages in tailored suits, but this single moment was somehow harder than all of that. He lifted his eyes, a flicker of humiliation and desperation breaking through the calm he tried to maintain. Camilla studied him quietly. His posture, his voice, the way he tried so hard not to sound afraid, none of it felt like a lie, and something inside her shifted. Before she realized what she was doing, she stood up. "I'll pay for him," she said. The bus went silent. Logan turned, stunned, as Camilla walked forward and handed the driver the last of her coins. "He's getting on," she added, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. "You don't have to do that," Logan murmured, uneasy with the idea of being helped. "I already did," she replied. "You should sit before he changes his mind." And he stepped onto the bus, almost awkwardly, as if unused to receiving kindness without strings attached. His heart raced for reasons he couldn't understand. He took a seat 3 rows ahead, and for a moment, he allowed himself to breathe. When the bus reached her stop, Camilla stood and walked toward the doors. Something in Logan panicked. He turned. "Hey," he called softly. She paused. "Thank you. You helped me more than you know." She gave him a small, tired smile. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes." She stepped into the night, and the doors closed behind her. Logan watched her silhouette fade into the quiet street, completely unaware that this ordinary girl, with her exhausted smile and simple kindness, had just shaken the foundation of his guarded world. As the bus rolled on, Logan stared out the window, unable to stop replaying the moment she stood up for him. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she lived. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't going to forget her. The search across New York and the reunion no one expected. The penthouse was silent when Logan stepped inside, but the silence didn't soothe him the way it usually did. He sat on the edge of the leather sofa, staring at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The city glowed with its usual grandeur, yet he felt strangely disconnected from it all. The air conditioning hummed softly, steady and controlled everything his life had always been. But his mind wouldn't stop racing. All night, he replayed the moment Camila handed over her last few dollars. That small gesture cut through layers of privilege he hadn't even realized he was wrapped in. It wasn't pity. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't calculated. It was real. And real was something he hardly encountered anymore. By morning, he knew he wouldn't be able to shake her from his thoughts. So he put on a clean suit, fixed his tie, and stepped back out into the city with a purpose he couldn't fully explain, not even to himself. He remembered her uniform, the shade of blue on her apron, the general direction she walked when she left the bus. That was all he had. He spent hours walking through Queens and Brooklyn, visiting diners and coffee shops, asking subtle questions without revealing who he was. He didn't want anyone treating his search like a PR stunt or a wealthy man's whim. He simply said he was looking for a waitress who worked late and wore navy. Most people shook their heads. A few pointed him to another street, another diner, another possibility. The fourth diner he entered smelled faintly of coffee and pancakes, and he nearly turned back, thinking it was just another dead end. But then he saw her standing behind the counter, tying her apron, a few loose strands of hair falling beside her cheek. She looked different in the morning light, still tired but in a way that felt warm, grounded, human. For a moment, Logan froze. Camila didn't notice him at first. She was focused on arranging mugs in neat rows, humming quietly to herself. When she finally looked up and recognized the man in the tailored suit, she blinked in disbelief. "You," she whispered. "You're the guy from the bus." Logan stepped closer, unsure how to smile without looking foolish. "I wanted to return the favor," he said. "The bus fare." She laughed softly. "You searched half the city for a $2 ticket? For me, it was worth it." He didn't know if that sounded strange, but it was the truth. And something in the way she studied him suggested she believed him more than she expected to. Camila poured a cup of coffee and slid it toward him. "Well, if you insist, you can pay for this instead." He sat at the counter, and their conversation flowed unexpectedly easily. She talked about long shifts, her dream of opening a bakery, her mother who worked 2 jobs. He found himself listening more intently than he ever had to anyone. There was no pretense in her voice, only sincerity shaped by survival. And slowly, a routine began. Every day at the exact same time, Logan walked through the diner doors. At first, Camila pretended not to notice. Then she pretended she wasn't waiting for him. But every time the bell above the door chimed, her eyes glanced up before she could stop herself. Yet something about him didn't add up. The way he held his cup too refined. The way he described coffee too informed. The suit too perfect for a man who claimed to have been robbed. And one night, as she left after closing, she saw him stepping into a sleek black sedan that definitely wasn't the one she'd seen broken on the street. Her chest tightened. Who exactly was this man who sat at her counter every morning, asked about her dreams, and looked at her like she was someone worth paying attention to? As Logan walked away that night, unaware she was watching, Camila whispered under her breath, "Who are you really?" And with that question hanging in the air, the story pushed forward toward truths neither of them were ready to face. The truth beneath the ordinary. Camila realizes Logan isn't who she thought. The locker room was silent except for the low hum of the fluorescent light above Camila's head. She sat on the wooden bench, still in her apron, staring at the sleek black sedan she had seen Logan step into just minutes earlier. The image replayed in her mind again and again. The polished door handle, the perfectly pressed suit he suddenly seemed comfortable wearing, the driver who rushed to open the door for him, and a single question kept circling inside her chest, sharp and relentless. A man who had been robbed last night did not magically reappear in a luxury car the next day. Was he telling the truth, or had he been performing a role she didn't know about? She pressed her palms together, trying to steady her breathing. Logan had been kind, smart, strangely gentle for someone who carried himself with such quiet confidence. She remembered how he listened to her talk about her dreams, how his expression softened whenever she spoke, how sincere he seemed when thanking her for the bus fare. But then she remembered how he stumbled over his words with the bus driver, how he avoided eye contact when she questioned him about the robbery. The contradictions tangled in her thoughts until she felt she could hardly tell which version of him was real. By the time she stepped back into the diner for her evening shift, dusk had painted the windows amber. Logan walked in shortly after, right on schedule, with the same warm smile he always offered her. But tonight it landed differently. His presence felt polished, practiced, rehearsed in a way she suddenly couldn't ignore. She took his order, wrote it down, and forced her expression to stay neutral, even though her heartbeat had quickened. He asked how her day was. She gave a short answer. He tried to joke. She didn't laugh. Beneath their words, a quiet tension formed, thin, delicate, and undeniably there. She decided to try something simple. "What do you do for work, Logan?" she asked lightly, though the question held far more weight than she let on. He blinked, just for a second, before answering. "Hospitality. I'm in the hotel industry." The vague reply felt like a door closing before she could peek inside. When she pressed gently for more detail, he shifted the conversation toward her instead, her bakery idea, her favorite coffee roasts, anything but himself. It was too smooth to be accidental. Then came the small details she couldn't ignore. Logan ordered a rare single-origin espresso blend no one else at the diner even knew they carried, describing the flavor profile like someone who had traveled the world tasting things beyond her imagination. He complimented the acidity and finished with a familiarity that belonged to people who lived in upscale cafes, not on bus routes. One of the other waiters leaned closer and whispered, "That guy, he's no bus rider." And for the first time, Camila felt a chill run down her spine. Later, when Logan reached for his pocket to pay, his hand paused mid-air. No wallet, no instinctive patting down of empty pockets. He simply froze for a fraction too long, like a man used to having everything suddenly realizing he didn't. Camila noticed the hesitation immediately. It wasn't the reaction of someone accustomed to not carrying money. It was the reaction of someone who always had it, without exception. The unease grew with every passing interaction. The way he talked about cities, London, Singapore, Dubai, as if they were familiar stops instead of distant dreams. The way he described business trips and five-star breakfasts like they were mundane parts of life. None of it aligned with the man she met on the bus. And yet, there he was, helping her wipe down the counter, teasing lightly about her flower-covered apron, leaning close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence. The chemistry between them was undeniable. But beneath it all, suspicion simmered quietly. When her shift finally ended, she stepped outside into the night air, pulling her jacket tight around her. She saw him then, Logan, standing beside a black sedan parked near the diner's entrance, the same sedan she'd glimpsed earlier. This time, she watched the driver open the door respectfully, the way chauffeurs do for people who don't just ride in cars, they command them. Camila froze. Her breath caught. Everything inside her stilled. People did not have chauffeurs unless they lived in a different world than hers. Logan stepped into the car without noticing her, and the door shut with a soft, expensive click. The engine started, quiet as a whisper, and the sedan rolled away, disappearing into the night. Camila stood motionless at the curb, the wind brushing past her like a warning. Something about him was a lie. Something big. The question tightened inside her until it hurt. Why would a man like that step into the life of a waitress like her? She didn't know. But she intended to find out. The truth breaks open. Logan has nowhere left to hide. Camila arrived at the diner earlier than usual, her mind still replaying the moment she watched Logan disappear into that black sedan. She took a deep breath and tied her apron with shaking fingers. Today was the day she would get answers, not polite half-truths, not vague explanations, real answers. She checked the time. Logan always walked through the door at exactly 9:05 a.m., as reliable as the morning coffee she brewed. When the bell above the door chimed, her heart jolted in her chest. Logan entered with the same easy stride, offering her the same familiar smile. But as soon as he looked at her face, his expression faltered slightly, sensing the shift in the air. Something was different. Something he couldn't read. "Camila," he said softly, "are you okay today?" She wiped the counter, avoiding his eyes for a moment before looking straight at him. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "And I need you to be honest." Logan nodded slowly, though his jaw tightened with unease. "Of course. What do you actually do for work?" she asked. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had passed between them before. Logan opened his mouth, hesitating only a second, but it was enough for her to see it, the flicker of fear, the instinct to hide. "I told you. Hospitality. What hotel? What company?" she pressed, refusing to back down this time. Logan's breath caught. His gaze dropped for a moment, as if he were choosing between two worlds. When he finally lifted his eyes again, something resigned settled in them. "My family owns Kensington International Hospitality Group," he said quietly. Camila felt her stomach drop. The name hit her like cold water. Kensington International wasn't just a company. It was one of the largest luxury hotel empires in the country. She had cleaned rooms in one of their Manhattan locations years ago. She knew the brand. She knew the wealth behind it. And now she knew the truth. "You're a Kensington?" she whispered, disbelief tightening her throat. Logan nodded. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to treat me differently. If..." Camila felt heat rise behind her eyes, anger and hurt mixing like a bruise forming beneath the skin. "I paid your bus fare with the last few dollars I had," she said. "Do you have any idea what that meant for me? And you couldn't even tell me the truth about who you are?" "I wasn't lying to hurt you," Logan insisted. "I wanted you to see me without everything that comes with my name. But that's the point," she said, voice breaking. "You stripped yourself of the truth so I wouldn't know the real you. How am I supposed to trust someone who can hide an entire life like it's nothing?" He stepped closer, desperation creeping into his tone. "Camila, I've never met anyone who saw me as just a person. You were the first. I didn't want to lose that." She shook her head. "Maybe you didn't mean to lie. But you still did. And the worlds we come from? They don't fit. Not naturally. Not easily. Let me try," he pleaded. "Let me show you that it doesn't matter." But she had already made up her mind. The hurt was too fresh, the betrayal too sharp. She untied her apron and placed it on the counter, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need space. I need air. I need to figure out what's real." Then she walked out. Logan hurried after her, but she moved quickly down the sidewalk, refusing to look back. He stopped halfway, watching her disappear into the crowd. Each step she took felt like a thread snapping inside him. He had spent his whole life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, and the one person who didn't was now walking away because he didn't trust her with the truth. Standing on the curb, Logan whispered into the cold morning air, "Camila, you're the most honest thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm not letting this end here." Crowed. For the first time, he understood the cost of his own choices, and he knew exactly where he needed to go next, to face the man who taught him to lie. When two worlds collide, Logan confronts the Kensington legacy. The moment Logan stepped into the glass tower of Kensington International, the weight of his last conversation with Camila pressed sharply against his ribs. The lobby stretched out before him in polished marble and sterile white light, every corner immaculate, every detail curated for intimidation. His reflection followed him across the glossy floor, a man dressed perfectly, built perfectly, carrying a life that wasn't entirely his, and the question kept echoing inside his head as he walked toward the executive elevators. If Camila saw him standing here, surrounded by everything he'd never told her, would she believe anything he said ever again? The air in the building was cold in a deliberate, mechanical way. Assistants and analysts moved quickly around him, offering polite greetings without ever meeting his eyes for more than a second. For them, Logan was less a person and more a title, an heir, a future CEO, a Kensington carved out of the same stone as the marble around them. He passed the long boardroom with its 40-seat table, the silent screens displaying financial reports, the massive portrait of Victor Musk Kensington staring down like a reminder carved into the bones of the place. Here, everything had rules, everything had a place, and none of it had room for a waitress from Queens whose kindness had undone him in a single night. When Logan entered his father's office, Victor didn't bother to look up. Papers rustled beneath his pen. The skyline gleamed behind him through the towering windows, framing Victor like a man built out of concrete and expectation. Only when Logan stopped in front of the desk did Victor finally lift his eyes, flat, and unreadable. "You're late," Victor said, though Logan knew his father had no idea what time he was supposed to arrive. It was simply the tone of a man who believed the world should always be waiting for him. Logan sat without being asked. The silence between them stretched thin. Victor tapped the pen twice before placing it down. "You've been distracted," he said, "and distractions, in our position, are dangerous." Logan felt his jaw tighten. "I needed time to think." "About what?" Victor shot back. "About the responsibilities you're neglecting? About the future we've spent decades preparing for you to inherit?" "I wasn't aware it was a future I was allowed to question," Logan replied quietly. Victor leaned back, studying him as though analyzing a flawed piece of architecture. "I've heard rumors," he said. "Rumors that you've been spending time with a woman, a waitress." He paused just long enough to let the word sting. "That is not the path of a Kensington." The dismissal in his father's voice ignited something hot behind Logan's ribs. "Her name is Camila," he said, "and she's not a distraction." "She is beneath you," Victor answered calmly, with a certainty that made Logan's hands curl into fists. He tried to explain not about love, not even about feelings, but about honesty, about wanting to be seen as a person instead of a successor. But every attempt was cut off before it could breathe. Victor dismissed each sentence with a wave of his hand, as if Logan were an employee pitching a failing idea. "You were born to lead," Victor said, "not to chase after some emotional indulgence. Feelings fade. Legacy does not." Something inside Logan cracked. "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly. Victor blinked. "What does happiness have to do with anything?" "Everything," Logan whispered. His father's voice sharpened. "Happiness is irrelevant. We are not children. We build empires, not fantasies." And for the first time in his life, Logan saw the truth with startling clarity. Victor hadn't raised him to live. He had raised him to replace him. Before Logan could respond, the TV behind them flickered to life with breaking news. His face filled the screen. Logan, flawless in a tuxedo, standing on a red carpet the night before. Cameras flashed. Reporters circled. He looked untouchable, sculpted, cold. Camila had seen this version of him, and it had broken her trust. Logan stared at his own image, feeling disgust twist low in his stomach. That man on the screen didn't look like someone who had ever sat inside a diner at midnight or smiled at a girl paying for his bus fare with her last dollar. That man was a Kensington, and that identity had cost him the only person who had ever looked at him and seen more. He stood abruptly. "I'm done pretending." Victor frowned. "Sit down, Logan." But Logan didn't. "I'm choosing something for myself, for the first time in my life." "Where are you going?" Victor demanded. "To stop living as someone I never agreed to be," Logan said, turning toward the door. "To stop being your version of me." He walked out before Victor could speak again, the heavy office door closing behind him like the final punctuation on a life he was no longer willing to inherit. Today, he decided, he would no longer live like a Kensington. A confrontation between two worlds. Camila demands the truth, and Logan is pushed to his breaking point. Camila pushed through the revolving doors of Kensington International with a force she didn't know she had. Her breath came in fast bursts, her palms still trembling from the shock of the news segment she'd watched the night before the tuxedo, the cameras, the wealth that wrapped around Logan like a second skin. Everything she thought she knew had collapsed in seconds. The lobby around her buzzed with quiet luxury. Marble floors, touchscreen directories, suits so crisp they barely moved when people walked. Camila felt the eyes of receptionists and assistants on her, judging, assessing, wondering why a waitress in a faded jacket was storming into their world. But she didn't slow down. She couldn't. "Today," she whispered to herself, "I hear the truth from him. No more guessing, no more lies." The elevator banks towered ahead like steel gates to another universe. Executives in tailored suits passed her with clipped steps, glancing her up and down before looking away. She felt small in every possible way, but she kept her spine straight. The pain inside her had made her stronger, not weaker. Before she reached the elevators, a guard stepped into her path. "Miss, may I help you?" His tone was polite, but edged with suspicion. "I need to see Logan Kensington," Camila said firmly. "I'm afraid that's not possible without an appointment." She held her ground. "Tell him Camila Hart is here. He'll come." The guard hesitated, assessing her resolve, then lifted his radio. Camila waited tense, raw, holding herself together with the last threads of anger and heartbreak. Moments later, the guard's expression shifted. "He's on his way." Logan appeared seconds later, striding across the lobby so fast he nearly stumbled. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled back, and there was something wild in his eyes. Fear, hope, desperation, all tangled together. "Camila," he breathed, his voice barely steady. She didn't move. "So this," she said softly, her gaze sweeping the building. "This is who you really are." Logan swallowed hard. "Let's talk upstairs." "No," she cut him off. "We talk here." People around them pretended not to stare. The sunlight pouring through the glass ceiling fell over both of them, highlighting the stark contrast between their worlds, him in polished gray, her in worn denim. "You lied to me," Camila said. "You let me believe you were just some guy who needed help." "I never wanted to lie," Logan said, stepping closer. You just didn't trust me with the truth," she finished for him. "You let me open up to someone who didn't exist." His voice shook. "I wanted you to see me without the name, without the pressure, without everything that ruins the way people look at me. But it's still who you are," she said, and the hurt in her voice nearly made him flinch. "You're not the man on the bus. You're this, all of this." She motioned toward the tower, the empire, the legacy built on distance and power. "And you made me feel foolish for not knowing it." Logan exhaled shakily. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did," she whispered. "And I don't know how to trust you now." It was. He stepped forward again, hands trembling. "Camila, please. I can explain everything. The expectations, the pressure, the fear of never living up to what they want. I've never had anything real in my life until I met you. I wanted to hold on to it. But real doesn't survive lies," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "The bus fare wasn't about money. It was about seeing someone who needed help. And all along, you were hiding a world I couldn't enter, even if I tried. I'm in 12 and let me try to fix this," he pleaded. "You can't fix something by pretending it was smaller than it was," she replied. He reached out, but she stepped back, and something inside him broke at the motion. The space between them felt like miles. "I don't belong here," Camila said. "And you don't belong in the world I live in. Not like this." "Camila," she shook her head. "Sometimes the distance isn't wealth, it's trust. And trust is the one thing you didn't give me." She turned and walked toward the doors, her reflection trailing across the marble floor like a fading imprint. Logan didn't chase her this time. He watched her leave, helpless, devastated, realizing that every lie he told, big or small, had built the wall now standing between them. As the doors closed behind her, something inside him shifted with startling finality. If he wanted any chance at saving what they had, he would have to do the unthinkable. And that night, Logan made a decision no Kensington had ever dared to make. The decision that shook New York. Logan walks away from the Kensington Empire. Night settled over Manhattan in a soft, shimmering haze as Logan stood alone in his office on the 58th floor, staring out at the city that had shaped him, boxed him in, suffocated him. The skyline glowed with its usual arrogance, bright, powerful, untouchable, yet tonight it felt like a cage of light instead of a kingdom. His reflection in the window looked foreign, a man carved by expectations, sculpted by pressure, polished until there was almost nothing human left, and the quiet question echoing in his chest was sharper than anything he had ever let himself admit. If he kept living like this, how long until he disappeared completely into someone else's shadow? Back at the penthouse, the silence was suffocating. The place had always been large, but now it felt hollow, a shell lined with expensive furniture and expensive loneliness. The untouched whiskey on the table reflected the glow of the city as Logan paced the room. Every thought circled back to Camila, the disbelief on her face, the hurt in her voice, the way she walked away from him like she had nothing left to protect. For the first time in his life, wealth meant nothing. The empire meant nothing. He had everything a man could want, except someone to be honest with. And without honesty, all of it felt meaningless. He turned on the television, half out of habit, half out of torment. The screen flashed with footage from the gala he'd attended the previous night at his father's command. Logan in a black tuxedo, wearing an expression as cold as the marble floors of this building. Cameras flashed as he posed beside executives. Reporters praised him as the future leader of Kensington International. The version of himself on the screen didn't look alive. He looked engineered. Camila had seen that version. No wonder she didn't trust him. The door opened suddenly. Victor Musk Kensington walked inside without knocking, the air in the room shifting instantly. His father didn't pause to greet him, didn't acknowledge the tension in Logan's posture. He simply removed his gloves, laid them on the counter, and began his interrogation. "You walked out of a meeting today," Victor said. "A meeting I spent 2 months arranging." Logan didn't turn away from the window. "I had something I needed to take care of." "Yes," Victor said sharply. "A girl. A distraction." Logan clenched his jaw. Victor studied him with a cold detachment that bordered on contempt. "You were born to lead an empire, not to be weakened by feelings. We don't have the luxury of emotional indulgence. Not in this family." For years, Logan had listened. He had obeyed. But something inside him finally snapped. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. Victor's face shifted confusion, then irritation, then disdain. "Happiness is for people with nothing important to lose." The sentence cut deeper than Victor realized. It exposed every hollow part of Logan's life, every silence, every sacrifice, every moment he bent under the weight of someone else's vision. And suddenly, the truth felt unbearably clear. He wasn't living. He was performing. "I'm done," Logan said, turning away from the window. "I'm done living a life that isn't mine." Victor laughed once, a cold, short sound. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm leaving the company," Logan said firmly. At first, Victor didn't react, as if his mind refused to process the words. Then his expression darkened into disbelief. Then, anger. "You would destroy the legacy of an entire family because of a waitress?" "No," Logan said, stepping forward. "I'm leaving because this legacy destroyed everything in me that felt real." Victor's voice rose sharply. "You ungrateful child. Everything you have, everything you are, comes from me." "All I've ever been is what you built," Logan replied. "But it's not who I am. Not anymore." The argument exploded, Victor's rage clashing with Logan's determination, years of tension breaking open like a dam. Victor called him weak, foolish, manipulated by sentiment. Logan countered with a truth he had never spoken aloud. "I've never felt loved in this family, only used." Silence fell. Without another word, Logan walked to his desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out the resignation documents he had drafted months earlier but never had the courage to sign. Tonight, courage wasn't the issue. Necessity was. He signed in quick, decisive strokes, then typed a short email to the board. "Effective immediately, I resign." A strange calm settled over him as he hit send. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight lift. The next morning, New York woke to chaos. Financial outlets blared headlines across the city. Logan Gates Kensington resigns overnight, industry in shock. Analysts speculated about internal feuds, secret scandals, corporate warfare. Some whispered about a mysterious woman. Cameras camped outside the Kensington Tower. Reporters begged for statements. Logan ignored it all. He stood in the center of his penthouse as dawn crept across the windows, painting the room in soft gold. His voice was barely above a breath, but every word was true. "Camila," he whispered, "I've chosen my life. Will you give me a chance to choose you too?" The reunion in Central Park, the beginning of a life built from truth. Camila's hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the morning newspaper behind the diner counter. The headline stretched across the page in bold letters like a punch to the chest. "Kensington heir resigns from empire overnight." She froze, eyes scanning every line, every detail. There was no scandal, no leaked memo, no corporate meltdown. Just a quiet, shocking departure. Logan had walked away from everything, money, power, legacy, and he had done it alone. Her breath caught as a terrible possibility bloomed in her chest. Had he done it because of her? The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She kept seeing fragments of him, the desperate honesty in the lobby, the apology trembling in his voice, the way he looked at her as though she was the only thing grounding him to the world. The more she replayed it, the more something inside her softened. Someone willing to give up a world they never chose wasn't lying. They were drowning. That afternoon, she finally typed a message her pride had held back for days. "We need to talk." She hovered for a moment, then pressed send. 11 seconds later, her phone lit up with Logan's reply. "Whenever you want, wherever you want." Her heart thudded against her ribs. She typed, "Central Park, 4 p.m. The park glowed under the autumn light, the lake reflecting shades of gold and quiet blue. Camila sat on a wooden bench by the water, twisting a loose thread on her sleeve as she tried to calm the storm inside her. She wasn't sure what she expected. Apologies, explanations, maybe a goodbye. She only knew she needed the truth, unfiltered and unpolished. When Logan appeared, he was slightly out of breath, as though he had run the last few yards. His tie was gone, his hair ruffled by the wind, his expression raw. For the first time, he looked like a man without a fortress around him. He stopped in front of her. "Camila," he said softly, "thank you for meeting me." She stared at him, searching for the version of him she knew. "You left your family's empire," she said quietly. "You walked away from everything." "I walked away from everything that wasn't mine," he replied. "I didn't leave for you. I left because I finally realized the life I was living was killing who I really am. But you were the first person who made me believe I had a choice." Camila swallowed, struggling to steady her voice. "I was scared," she admitted. "Your world felt too big, too cold. I didn't want to disappear in it." "I left that world," Logan said. "Not for you to rescue me, but because I didn't want to belong to something built on lies and fear." He took a step closer. "I want to build something new. Something real." He told her everything, childhood scheduled to the minute, emotions dismissed, expectations branded into his skin. He spoke of nights staring at ceilings, wondering who he might have been if he'd been allowed to choose. And then he told her the truth she had needed most. "You saw me," he said. "Not the name, not the money, just me. And I didn't want to lose that." Camila felt her defenses soften, layer by layer. "I'm afraid of being swallowed by your life," she whispered. "Afraid I'll disappear." Logan shook his head. "I want a life where neither of us disappears. A world we build from the ground up, together." Her breath caught as he continued. "I've been planning something," he said. "A boutique hotel by the ocean. Small, warm, ours. And I want you to open a cafe and bakery inside it. Not because I'm saving you, but because I believe in what you can create." Camila looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not the heir, not the Kensington legacy, but a man choosing himself for the first time. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we do this," she said, "it starts with the truth. Nothing hidden, nothing half said." Logan reached for her hand. "Only the truth. From now on, two-way." Camila held his gaze for a long moment before finally giving a small, trembling nod. Then, "Let's try again." A slow, relieved smile broke across Logan's face. "I won't waste this chance," he said. As they stood together by the lake, the wind carrying the scent of autumn around them, the future felt uncertain yet, for the first time, entirely theirs. And somewhere between falling leaves and fading sunlight, a new beginning quietly formed. It was the beginning of the life they would choose, not the one chosen for them, building a shared dream and paying the price for every choice. The bus rolled out of New York as the morning sun spilled across the window, casting a warm glow over Camila's face. She watched the skyline shrink behind them, her breath catching at the weight of the moment. For the first time in her life, she wasn't leaving the city to escape something, she was leaving to build something new. Logan reached over and took her hand gently, his thumb brushing her knuckles in a steady rhythm. "We're really doing this," he whispered, almost in disbelief. She nodded, and though excitement bloomed in her chest, a knot of fear lingered beneath it. Starting over was beautiful, but it was also terrifying. When the bus pulled into the quiet coastal town a few hours later, the world shifted. Gone were the honking taxis, the cement towers, the endless noise. In their place stood rows of white wooden houses with blue shutters, a stretch of ocean shimmering beyond them, and the salty breeze that felt like a soft invitation. Logan inhaled deeply, his eyes softening in a way Camila had never seen in the city. "I used to come here as a kid," he said. "It was the only place I ever felt free." Camila smiled, though uncertainty shadowed her thoughts. "What if this is the biggest gamble of my life?" she asked quietly. Logan squeezed her hand. "Then we're gambling together." He led her to an old seafront mansion perched on a slight hill. The paint was peeling, the windows were fogged, and the porch sagged dangerously, but the structure had an undeniable charm, like a story waiting to be retold. "This," Logan said, "is our hotel." Camila laughed with equal parts awe and terror. "Logan, this place looks like it might collapse if a seagull lands too hard." He grinned. "Then we'll fix it before any seagulls show up." End quote. They spent the next days mapping out every detail of their dream. Logan handled architects, permits, and endless paperwork. Camila scribbled ideas for coffee blends, fresh pastries, breakfast menus, and cozy corners where guests could sit and breathe. They sat together in dusty rooms with sunlight cutting through broken blinds, surrounded by collapsing walls and piles of old paint cans. Yet somehow, it felt magical. They weren't just renovating a building, they were rebuilding their lives, restoring parts of themselves that had long been neglected. But dreams, even the sweetest ones, come with obstacles. A week into construction, the structural engineer delivered news that struck like a blow. The foundation was weak, dangerously so. Costs would double. The timeline would stretch for months. Logan's shoulders stiffened, tension radiating through his body. He wasn't broke, not yet, but every dollar he spent was his own. Money he had saved from years of work, not inherited wealth. And watching it drain so quickly, twisted anxiety deep into his gut. Camila saw the worry in him and placed a hand on his arm. "If it takes longer, it takes longer," she said. "I don't want this place to be rushed. I want it to be right." Her gentleness steadied him. He wasn't used to slowing down. Kensington projects were machines, fast, sharp, efficient. But this wasn't a Kensington project. This was theirs. And learning to breathe at her pace was part of the journey. Still, stress began to creep in. Camila noticed him working late at night, flipping through documents with furrowed brows. Logan noticed her hesitating with receipts, calculating flour costs twice before placing small orders for her bakery tests. The fear of failing each other hung between them like a faint tremor. One evening, after a long day of construction delays and financial strain, Camila pulled Logan toward the shoreline. The sky was streaked with purple and orange, waves crashing rhythmically against the sand. "You don't have to make this perfect for me," she said softly. "I didn't fall for perfection. I fell for you." Her words disarmed him completely. He felt his throat tighten and blinked hard to keep emotion from spilling over. No one had ever told him he was enough, just as he was. No titles, no expectations, just Logan. They moved forward after that moment slowly, carefully, hand in hand. Logan sought help from an old college friend and secured a personal loan, refusing to use anything connected to his family name. He showed up on site daily in work boots and dusty jeans, swinging hammers with the crew. Camila tested pastry recipes every week, bringing warm trays of muffins and cinnamon rolls to the construction team. Laughter began to echo through the once empty halls. Paint replaced dust. Hope replaced doubt. By late summer, the mansion finally began to resemble something close to livable. The walls were straight, the floors level, and the windows clear enough to reflect sunlight in golden waves. On the day the building passed its structural inspection, Logan stood on the newly built balcony as the sun dipped into the ocean. He exhaled deeply, a long, honest breath he felt he had been holding his entire life. Camila joined him, resting her head against his shoulder. He looked down at her, warmth pooling in his chest. "I used to think life was supposed to be a straight line," he said. "Predictable, clean, perfect. But I guess all the twists and turns were leading me to this exact place right here with you." She smiled, unaware that behind those soft words, Logan was planning something even bigger. The hotel's completion wasn't the only milestone approaching. A different future was unfolding quietly inside him, one he intended to ask her to share. A cinematic ending from a bus ticket to a proposal by the sea. The morning of the grand opening arrived, draped in soft sunlight and a breeze that carried the scent of salt water through the freshly painted halls. White curtains billowed gently against open windows, and the ocean glittered just beyond the dunes. Camila stood in the doorway of her cafe taking in the warm wooden counters, the glass jars of pastries, the handwritten chalkboard menu she'd spent hours perfecting. It looked exactly like the dream she had whispered to Logan months earlier, except now it was real, solid beneath her fingertips. Logan watched her from across the lobby, his heart pounding harder than it had the day he resigned from his family's empire. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, not the opening itself, but the conversation that would follow. He nodded to himself. "It's time," he murmured under his breath. For weeks, he had replayed this moment in his mind, imagining every word, every expression on her face. And now that the day was here, he felt both terrified and certain. Guests began to pour in, locals curious about the renovation, travelers drawn by the coastal charm. They praised the pastries, the coffee, the serene atmosphere. Camila floated through the room in an effortless rhythm, greeting people, offering recommendations, her eyes glowing with a light he'd rarely seen in New York. Logan moved among the guests as well, but his attention never drifted far from her. The ring in his pocket felt heavy, like a heartbeat. Eventually, when the busiest rush had passed, Logan walked toward her and offered a quiet smile. "There's something I want to show you," he said. She gave him a curious look but allowed him to guide her outside. They walked across the warm sand as the wind played with her hair, the waves rolling in steady, calming pulses. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath. When they stopped, Logan turned to face her fully. His voice was gentle, but every syllable carried years of truth. "That night on the bus," he said, "you gave me something I didn't realize I was starving for a chance to be seen without the Kensington name. You helped me when you had so little to give. You offered kindness without knowing who I was, and in doing so, you gave me the courage to become who I really am." Camila's lips parted slightly, emotion rising in her eyes. Logan reached into his pocket, breath-catching. "I've built empires I never cared about, walked red carpets that meant nothing. But this building a life with you, this is the only thing that's ever felt like mine." He lowered himself onto one knee as the waves brushed against the shore behind him. The moment was simple, quiet, intimate, no spectacle, no audience. Just the man he chose to be offering his whole heart to the woman who had unknowingly changed his life. "Camila Hart," he said, voice trembling. "Will you live the life we choose together? The one no one else writes for us?" Her hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled freely. She nodded, unable to form words at first. Then, with a breath that broke into a smile, she whispered, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger as she pulled him up into a tight embrace. The world around them dissolved, the hotel, the noise, the past leaving only the two of them clinging to each other on the edge of the ocean, where possibility stretched endlessly beyond the horizon. Months later, their wedding took place on the same stretch of sand. It was small and intimate, attended only by close friends and the workers who had helped rebuild the hotel. There were no lavish chandeliers or towering centerpieces, just flowers tied to wooden chairs, gentle music, and an ocean breeze that carried every promise they spoke directly into each other's hearts. Victor received an invitation but never came. Yet even his absence felt like closure. Logan no longer needed his approval. He had built a life rooted not in legacy, but in truth. After the ceremony, Logan and Camila stood outside the cafe as the evening sun dipped toward the water. The hotel buzzed softly behind them, alive with guests and laughter. Camila looked toward the waves, her voice touched with wonder. "It's crazy," she said, "how one small moment, a bus ticket, led us all the way here." Logan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Maybe the smallest moments are the ones that change everything," he whispered. She leaned into him as the sign of the cafe glowed in the fading light, casting a warm reflection on the sand. And in that quiet, perfect moment, they understood that their entire journey, every twist, every risk, every leap of faith had grown from one simple act of kindness into a life far larger than anything they had ever dreamed, a life entirely their own. Life has a quiet way of reminding us that the smallest moments can lead us to the places we were always meant to find. Sometimes it's not the grand decisions, but a simple act of kindness, a choice made on an ordinary day, that opens the door to something better. And even when the road feels uncertain or heavier than we expect, we're never as stuck as we fear. There is always another turn, another chance, another beginning waiting just ahead. If you're listening to this right now, maybe on your way home, maybe late at night, maybe while the weather outside matches your mood, I'd love to hear where you are and how this story made you feel. Drop a quick comment and let me know your city or what the sky looks like where you are. And if these stories speak to something in you, don't forget to subscribe. There's always another journey to share, and I'd be grateful to have you here for the next one.